Teachers are natural innovators, entertainers, and problem solvers. They dream of growing old into the profession, teaching their kids' kids. But sometimes career goals shift, and that makes opportunities outside of the classroom seem intangible. Questioning, who am I if I'm not a teacher? I'm your host, Ali Simon.
And I'm your co-host, JoDee Scissors.
And this is Teacher Shift.
It's no secret that teachers find ways to supplement their income. Tutoring, seasonal work, and summer school, to name a few. Today, our guest shares with us how she became an accidental entrepreneur after her first investor gave her $100.
Today, our guest is Abigail Reller, a former teacher of 9 years. Abigail, along with her husband, Aaron, are owners of Abigail Reller Art. Abigail is no stranger to entrepreneurship, thriving on creative solutions to help people. When she's not covered in paint, which is never, she enjoys listening to podcasts and keeping up with the latest interior design trends. She currently lives in Metairie, Louisiana, with her husband and 4 children, Anna, Francis, Benjamin, Peter, and Thomas. We're so glad to have you on the show today, Abigail.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've been really looking forward to it.
So for our listeners who may not have heard previously, we interviewed your husband, Aaron Reller, who's also a former teacher, for the podcast. And then we learned during that interview that he was married to a former teacher himself. And we were just so eager to talk to you too, because we've actually had one other couple on the show. We've had Adam and Ashley on the show, and they both were former teachers. And it was just really interesting because that is actually pretty common, I think, in education, that you'll meet couples who are both educators. So excited to talk about your experience today about teaching and then deciding to ultimately leave the classroom and start something new. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So Aaron and I met teaching. So after college, I took a job teaching religion at a Catholic high school in Mississippi. I taught 8th grade. So I was like the babies of the high school. I loved it. Wondered, like, is this going to be a forever thing? How does it go? Like, Aaron was an ACE teacher there at the same time. So he and I got to know each other. We dated for like 9 months, got engaged. Then we moved down to New Orleans, which is where I'm from. I took a job teaching early childhood here. So I taught at an independent Catholic school in New Orleans. I taught 1-year-olds through kindergarten religion. Loved it. That was like sweet spot, dream job, like amazing. It was the kind of thing where the different classes would come into my room. You know, it was like I was like an enrichment class kind of. It was that kind of a schedule. And so it would come into my room for like 45 minutes at a time and then go. And it was just so fun. So that was an all-girls school. So then I realized, like, okay, we've got one daughter now, we have a son. If they're going to be in school together, I'd like to be able to work at the school where they're going to go. Made the transition to where I was teaching middle school religion at St. Catherine of Siena. And it was awesome. I loved it. Things definitely changed a little bit because it was like, okay, now I'm taking home papers to grade as opposed to putting all of my time into my lesson plans. So I felt like that was a little bit of a shift for me, like, because initially when I taught 8th grade, I didn't have children, right? So like if I needed to grade papers after school or if I needed to do any of that, it was fine.
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you have kids. And I think that's something that I personally felt also. And I know, JoDee, a lot changed for you too when you had your daughter. We start teaching and we have these, expectations of what we can handle, what we can manage. And then we add kiddos to our lives and it really changes. And I also think, grading papers is a lot. And it would be great if we had enough time in the school day where we could actually have like planning and get that all done and not have to take it home. But it doesn't end up panning out that way.
I felt like I was constantly juggling. I was juggling being a teacher, being a new parent, and taking care of myself. And the one that kind of always fell was me. I was always sick. I was always tired and really started to take a toll on me personally because I was sacrificing for others, which, that's kind of what, like, you have that type of servant mentality when you are a teacher and you are taking care of your kids, but what boundaries do you have to be able to pull back and say, hey, I have to be well so I can be present?
Absolutely. And I remember thinking like my kids would get sick and I would think like, okay, I took off this day. Okay, now I took off another one and another one. Like, shoot, if I get it, what's gonna,
I'm going to run out of days. Like
yeah, I'm
I'm
gonna
going to
run out
run
of
out of
days.
days. You only have a certain number of days. And then honestly, like the hardest part is when you're out, it's so much work to be out because you have to like prepare the lesson plans for the sub.
I know, I know. On one hand, I'm like, I get it, but it's not ideal. And it's not the same as like, it's not like you can walk into like your desk job or go run your Etsy shop or go do whatever. Like, and you kind of like feel bad and you're not 100%, but like you can still like grind out the work. It's like you have to go to work not feeling good and like still do the same performance or be engaging. Like you can't just be like, oh, sorry, guy, like I'm really not feeling it today.
No, especially not with little ones. You really have to engage them. I taught high school, so I had a little bit more leeway. Like there were times where I was like, you know, class, and I taught Spanish, so in my mind I'm thinking like clase, like I would just tell them like I'm not 100% today. Like please work on this, and then when I came back and I was feeling better, I'd have to like catch up on everything. But teaching the littles, because I've also taught like religious school and things like that with younger kids. And JoDee knows because you talk about this a lot, but like you're on all the time.
Yeah, you're right. Like I with my middle schoolers, I could say like I was pregnant for teaching middle school. So I'd be like, hold on, be right back, if I didn't feel good or whatever. And they were understanding and they were really good about it. And you can have those kinds of conversations, but you still owe them the best of what you can offer.
So you were feeling this way after teaching, and you had at this point, was it two children, or had you had your third?
So at this point, we had two children and I was teaching. And I remember my husband and I, so we had like bought a house after our daughter was born. And we felt like it was really a stretch, but we were like, we got this, it's going to be fine. And after our son, so we have a daughter and three sons, after the oldest two were born, I remember looking like at our finances one month and thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is the max. It was like, we're not going to be able to save. Like, we're not going to be able to have another kid, like, because there's no more dollars in like the pluses and minuses each month. And I remember feeling like, okay, like we're going to ride this train. We're going to see how it goes. And like we both loved teaching. And like I just didn't know how long we were going to be able to sustain it. And so then I get pregnant like a couple years later. Then COVID happens. And we had Peter the May of COVID. We went back to school that August. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep teaching. I started the year, and you know how like the restrictions were just different. So it was like instead of all the different classes coming to me, like I would go around to each middle school class. We would rotate instead of the kids rotating. And but then like my kids had to be at school and I had to make copies in the morning or after school. But like I couldn't have my kids with me at different areas of the building. It took like 3 days. And I was like, okay, living this, I'm realizing this can't happen. Between Ben and Peter, I had started my art business, which, like at one point I had tried like direct sales, like selling products of a different kind. Like there was always like, what if we do this? And Aaron was tutoring the whole time. Right. And then we decided like, okay, I was going to paint with Anna Francis one time in the summer. Then it came out like really beautiful. And I was thinking, wow, like I really love this. And my aunt was like, you should just share it on social media. Like, just see what happens.
Can I ask a question really quick? So, going back to the finances question, what I'm hearing is what you did where you all tried to supplement your income by tutoring and by doing these other things. You have this third child now, so you are using supplemental income to help sustain the lifestyle.
Yes. Like, so Aaron was tutoring often. I tutored for a little while. And then we were realizing, though, that so then after our whole day of teaching, then we were going to tutor, which was the time where we had to spend with our kids, which was one of the perks of being a teacher was like, oh, like you're off when they're off and you work when they're at school. But really, then there's no wiggle room for any margin of error. There's no, like, if they're off, we're off. So someone's got to be watching them all the time. It became like we were really feeling it. And I was realizing that then Aaron wouldn't get home till like 6 o'clock because he would go tutor after school. He's not getting home till 6, which is normal for a lot of people. And I think that a lot of times the argument is, well, if you're a teacher, like, you get off at 3 or you get off at 3:30, but like, it doesn't end there.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you kind of share with us is that you were encountering a lot of, I don't know if frustrations is the right word, but you thought you were going into a career that was really going to be probably a great family career. I think a lot of us go into teaching for that reason. I can tell you that that is probably my top reason why I picked education, was that I wanted to be there when I had kids, because my mom had her own business and she wasn't able to like take me to dance class and to go to all of my rehearsals. And so then you realize as you get deeper into it, depending on, your situation, but you were trying to increase your income, do tutoring, do after school activities, like, then you're not actually able to spend as much time with your family. And I think it maybe makes you question, I love teaching, but I also love my own family. And how am I going to make this work? Especially you have a growing family. We all know, even if you were getting a discount at your school where you were teaching and your kids were going, childcare is very expensive. And so, when you want to grow your family, we had another guest on the show that was one of the reasons why she left teaching, was because she had twins and she couldn't really afford daycare for 2 kids on a teacher's salary where she lived in Virginia. And so you have all these kind of obstacles that are coming up. And so that made you and your husband decide, okay, we need to supplement our income. Maybe we can really make this work. And I love hearing about how you started to do art with your oldest. So tell us a little bit about how the art studio started.
So she was 3 at the time, and we were painting over the summer together. We really wanted a piece of abstract art for above our sofa. And we couldn't find something that we really connected with and could also afford. So we were like, maybe I'll just make something with her. And I loved to paint, but like, I didn't know what I could do. So we worked together and we painted this piece and we loved it. It came out really beautifully. And so my aunt was like, y'all should just post it and just see what happens. So we posted it online, and the mother of a kid that Aaron was tutoring at the time saw it, and she said, hey, would she do something like that with my boys? And then an interior designer was at her house planning her powder room. And I remember her saying that she just mentioned it to her. She was like, this local artist, which like, I was not an artist at the time, like, I would have never, but she just says it to this interior designer. She's like, this local artist is going to be coming to paint with my boys, and this is where that's going to go. And the interior designer was like, that's an amazing concept. And so we had a meeting, the 3 of us, and the interior design firm allowed me to use the front of their office space as my studio. So I would go in, I would clear out the front, I would set up the drop cloths and bring the canvases, and people started doing it. And I love what I do. One of my favorite parts about teaching was actually parent-teacher conferences. I don't think that that's very common, but I always loved them because I loved getting to talk to the parents and being like, oh my gosh, you're so much like your kid, or, oh, that explains it. Like, this is the connection, or this is you, whatever. And so I feel like now what I get to do is I get to paint with these families, and I'm like, it's parent-teacher conference every day. Like, I get to see the kids and their parents and the dynamics, and I just love that. And so anyway, it really took off. And so that started like 2018, 2019, I think the space next to the parking lot where I would park for work every day became available for lease. And so we decided to rent that as the studio. And it was always like, okay, if I can make enough money to rent a studio, like, that would be awesome. Okay. Because it was just out of our house. So literally for like a year or more, our house was just covered in like canvases, art supplies, and everything. And I remember so much feeling like, are we irresponsible for like having a messy house like this? Like, are we irresponsible for me spending the weekends like painting, and then Aaron's got the kids, and then we're not all together, and like, is this going to become something, you just question yourself. And I remember always going back to, is it irresponsible that are we misusing our money? Like, what's going on here? Because something doesn't feel right. And I look around and I'm like, nobody else seems to be like really like this. And I don't mean to sound like overly privileged or anything. Like, I don't feel like our expectations were like very high. It just felt like the ends weren't meeting. And so, like, what was the plan, you know?
It kind of sounds like you were almost like an accidental entrepreneur. Like you didn't realize that you were building something throughout this process. You started something kind of unintentionally, right? Where you were doing art with your child. Someone else heard about it. And then it started to grow really in a very organic way. And for those of our listeners who have not seen this amazing artwork that Abigail does with her clients, you have to follow her on Instagram at Abigail Reller Art. I started following you years ago, and it's just such an amazing thing that you do when you bring kids and their parents together and they can be creative. And then you finish the product. Like there's different options for finishing it. But what I love about it is that it just grew out of a passion. It sounds like something you enjoy doing with your own children, and you were able to share that with other people. So you and Erin kind of accidentally fell into this and then are trying to make like more intentional decisions while being cautious about finances. Because honestly, as teachers, like it is hard to become an entrepreneur when that's going to require a lot of capital. You're on a dual teacher income.
Yeah. And I remember my aunt, the same one who was like, you should post this online. I remember her taking me to the art store and saying, here, I'll give you $100 to buy a canvas.
She was your investor. She invested in you.
She was my investor. And we couldn't have done that. Like there wasn't wiggle room.
I'm glad you're putting that into perspective. And I'm seriously just learning so much about your story right now because I went into it thinking I knew your story, but I didn't. First, I thought you were probably already an art teacher. I did not know that your subject area was religion and that, you had a lot of experience with these primary or early childhood ages, but also all the way up to middle school. And it makes sense that the root of your teaching, that the root of your pedagogy is good instruction, like making sure that you're working with children of all ages and helping them be successful. Because when you look at your videos, the way that you interact with all of these children is so beautiful. It looks so peaceful and fun. And I'm sure there are challenges, but what I notice first is that you're great with children. And then you see the art kind of take form. And I don't think anybody could do this job as well as a teacher because of the way you interact with the kids. And then all of those things that follow, like being an entrepreneur. I mean, teachers are entrepreneurs every day. They are having to improvise. They're having to make quick decisions. They're having to make rules and boundaries and do all of these things for large quantities of kids. And we already possess these skills that we have to then transfer when we do become a different type of entrepreneur, such as having a small business. So, what would you tell the teacher that is like you, that you kind of start this little business and you're kind of at a crossroad? Do you just come back to teaching or do you pursue this, head on? What would you tell that teacher that is trying to make that decision?
Okay, so this is a loaded question, right? So a lot of it has to do with the specifics of your financial situation and also what you want for your life. I think do it. I think take the time to invest in yourself and your family and your situation, whatever it is, right? Like whatever your picture of what you want your life to look like is, take the time to invest in something that could, even if you never leave teaching, like there are some businesses that you can start and you can get it running. And maybe it's a lot of work on the front end, but like it can kind of coast and supplement that teaching lifestyle. I think, I remember sitting with a couple of my teacher friends and we would look at each other and be like, what else can we do? What else can we do? And these are some amazing teachers. Like, that's what's sad. It's like, yes, there were things that were hard about teaching, right? That we're talking about and lamenting over occasionally. But it got to this point where when we looked at our family and we looked at our careers, we decided and we realized like it is a luxury to continue to teach. Like, we love it, but we can no longer choose this. And the scary part, and one of my biggest fears when I look at my children at school, is that like teachers are going to realize that. Like, it is not hard. And I say this with like humility. It is not hard to replace the salary of a teacher. Like, you can start an Etsy shop selling someone else's products and make more than teachers make. And I look at my kids and it's like, it's not just like, okay, middle school is one thing, right? You rotate, you're with a teacher for 50 minutes, an hour and a half if it's like a block schedule. Kids in like up to third grade or whatever, these self-contained classes, this is how they spend their day with like a teacher all day, the same one. And if she's exhausted or he's exhausted, or if they're at their max capacity everywhere else, then your kid is spending their day with somebody who is maxed out already. You know, I worry about that. I worry about it a lot. And I'm not saying that it's the fault of any of the schools that I taught at. I'm not saying it's the fault of any principal or pastor or whatever. Like, it's a systemic thing and I don't have the answer, but what's going to happen?
We think about that a lot. JoDee and I, we talk about that a lot. It's something that's on my mind basically every day. And I think one thing we have to put into perspective is that you were a teacher for 9 years. You contributed to various schools for 9 years. You gave a lot of yourself during that time, and that's so valuable. And I also think that it's okay to say, I'm not in a position where I can give it my all anymore. And if we can just continue to get people to become teachers, even if it's not their 30-year career, it's a valuable profession. I mean, all the skills that you learn by cultivating your practice, your pedagogy, like JoDee mentioned, allowed you to transition.
I really do believe that. And also, I will say this, teaching well and building the relationships with parents and students is, and has proved to be for me anyway, an excellent base network for starting a business beyond that. So Aaron and I, the people that we know, I mean, we've met some of the best people in the world. I really believe that. I'm like, we know some of the best people in the world, like parents, kids, families, coworkers. You meet so many people and you get to know on a personal level so many people. I feel like that's so unique. Even if you work in a huge corporation, you don't really know closely the number of people like you do if you're a teacher. And so if you have done this well, and if you really give like of yourself and build these relationships, these people will support you in whatever business you start. Like, if it's something that can apply to them. And so I feel like that is what I would tell a teacher too, who's considering it. Like, you right now in the relationships that you're building teaching, you're building your network. And I didn't realize that at the time, but in hindsight, so I had an open studio on Monday, right? And you could come in and buy ornaments. A good number of the people that came were parents of old students that I taught. And that wasn't to do the kid thing that I do, right? Like, that was to buy art that I make or ornaments that I make. I mean, that's amazing. And so I remember taking a marketing class in college, and it was human resource management or something like that. And this guy came in, he gave a talk about how his job, he ran the Superdome, which is like the sports arena here, right? One of the biggest things in New Orleans, like, it's where the Saints play. So everyone loves the Superdome. He ran the Superdome. And he said that when he traced it back, like, he realized that it was from a volunteer, like the connection that he made at a volunteer job during like the Olympic trials in New Orleans. Like, he met someone and then continued to just meet people along the way. And I remember thinking, like, that just stuck with me. And he was like, I did that volunteer position well. And I met these people and then they referred me to this. And like initially it was volunteering, right? But then it became like, oh, now I'm hired. And then now he like runs the Superdome.
Yeah, I've heard something similar like that. Like you can't really see the future, but when you look back, you can see how it's helped you every step of the way. And from what I hear, you have these families that you've built relationships with, and they're your cheerleaders, they're your customers, they're your marketers. They're out there doing grassroots marketing for you.
I have a note on my phone of cheerleaders.
Yeah. And you've gone on, you've built this business, you've gone on, you had Thomas, who we know has had health challenges, and you've been able to be there for your family. You and Aaron have been able to make really tough decisions to get to a point in life where you feel a little more sustained, a little more there for your family. And I think the power of both of you being teachers probably contributes to the fact that you are where you are today as you are reflecting back on, your path through 9 years. And we have to be thankful for all those years that we taught. And right now, where you are is an example of, the work that you did, how successful you were in the classroom, and the rapport that you built with all of those people. So thanks for your service for all of those years. And now you're on to the next thing using all your amazing teacher brain skills.
Totally, totally. And I think, some people are like, oh, don't be a teacher. Like, don't do this. Like, I would never tell someone. I loved teaching.
Ali, what's your famous saying? What's Ali's famous saying?
Teaching is the best first career. I think teaching is the best first career. And, to your point, I texted JoDee months ago. Daphne said she wants to be a teacher. Like, that's my daughter. And, it was like, it took me, like, I was like taken aback. I was like, you know what? You should be a teacher. Like, I can totally support that. I think it's great. I don't know if she'll end up being a teacher. She's only 8 years old, but I think that, there is so much value in the profession. And I do hope that long term, we can change things. We can, increase salary, able to have better time management for teachers and make it more of a longer term career. But right now, it's still a fabulous career to start off in. And being able to talk to you today and hear your teacher story, teacher turned entrepreneur, like it's just been a great gift, a wonderful way for us to start our day today. And I want to thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh, you are so welcome. And thank you for having me. It was a joy. And I love talking about teaching.
Thank you. And we want to let our listeners know that if you want to check out Abigail Reller Art, you can find more information at abigailrellerart.com. And as mentioned earlier, at Abigail Reller Art on Instagram, and we'll link those in the show notes. Are you interested in suggesting a topic for Teacher Shift, being a guest, or recommending a guest? Please see the episodes page on our website to make a submission. And if you'd like to write for us, see our blog page. If you liked Teacher Shift, give us a 5-star rating and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Today's episode was written and recorded by me, Ali Simon, and my co-host, JoDee Scissors. Executive produced by Teacher Shift. Produced and edited by Emily Porter. Original music, Emoji by Tubacker.